Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get the ball rolling here in just a moment. We'll give folks probably another 30 seconds to get in. All right. Well, I know we have some special guests that have limited time and have offered up some time to meet with us here today. So I won't keep us waiting too long because I know you guys probably both have quite busy schedules these days. So maybe we'll get our ball rolling here. I want to welcome everyone to the fall quarterly town hall here for Housing California. We appreciate everyone being here today. I'm Chris Martin, our policy director here at Housing California. We have four guests with us today. We kind of have two different panels that we'll be going about here to talk about both budget and state legislation, both from last year and looking forward. And we'll take time at the end of each of those sections to take a few questions. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible, but we'll try and take those in there's a Q&A piece on the bottom, so please place any questions you have in the Q&A there, not in the chat. It's easier to track when it's in the Q&A, so we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. I want to just start quickly by just naming that this was scheduled for when we were before the election, and a lot has certainly transpired over the last week, even in the last few moments here. And still a lot to be seen and understood as we head into a new administration. But regardless, this is certainly going to have an impact here, both federally and here in California. As many of you know, Governor already called a special session to prepare for the next administration. But what we do know is that the state and leaders like the folks we have here on today's call are going to continue to address issues critical to Californians. And luckily, we have some great leaders here in our state to continue that work. And to start, we have a panel with the two chairs of our budget committee in California here. So we'll meet with them, and then following that, we have Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, who also is on the Budget Committee and leads the homelessness and housing budget through Sub 5 in the Assembly. And then we have newly elected Senator, but formerly Assemblymember Reyes here to talk at the end. But to kick us off, I want to introduce our two budget chairs here, Senator Scott Wiener, chair of the Senate Budget Committee from Senate District 11 in San Francisco, and then Assemblymember Gabriel, the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, Assembly District 46, representing LA County, Ventura, and from the city of Encino. So welcome to you both. Appreciate you spending some time here with us today. And just wanted to kind of start by asking you to share a little bit about the landscape we're facing, both as we went into last year's budget and then how we're starting to think about things for decisions that are going to have to be made in the future. So whoever wants to kick us off, yeah.
I'll defer to my taller and wiser Senate counterpart.
Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you all for your work on housing. It's been great to work with Housing California on a lot of different issues, and so I'm just grateful for what you do. And we've worked hard in California to enact strong housing policies that are really playing out in a powerful way at the local level as we speak, in terms of folks zoning for more housing, making it easier to get housing approved, and particularly to make it easier and faster to get affordable housing approved and depoliticizing some of those decisions. So it's been very, very powerful. Of course, we need to make sure we have enough funding, and we know that we've never had a truly great federal partner in terms of funding housing. For 45 years. The federal government has defunded housing other than the low-income housing tax credit. And of course, this incoming administration, which is going to be a disaster garbage fire on many, many, many issues, and that is going to pertain to housing as well. So obviously not optimistic for new housing investment under this administration. and we're going to have to play a whole bunch of defense. And so that makes the state's role that much more important. Over the last 6 years, we have been able to work very collaboratively with Governor Newsom to dramatically increase the state's investment, which is great. The Governor Brown, although he was a fantastic governor in so many ways, was not a big fan of funding affordable housing, but Governor Newsom has been a really great partner. And last year, of course, or this year, of course, we had a massive budget deficit. We worked hard to try to protect as much housing investment as we could, and that was a priority for many of us in both houses. And then now going into next year, we of course don't know what the exact bottom line will be. I'd be surprised if we didn't have a deficit still. I think it's very likely that we will. Revenues have been better than anticipated. So, I think there's a reasonable chance that the budget situation will not be as bad as it was for this year, particularly since some of the moves we made to balance the current year's budget will carry over to next year. So, my hope is that it will not be as bad as the budget that we just balanced, but it's still going to be a tough budget year. And so I'm not optimistic we're going to be able to do a lot of new things, but hopefully it'll be, I hope, less challenging to at least play defense. And you never know when an opportunity is going to come up to do something new. So that's my take on the overall situation.
Anything you want to add there, Assemblymember, to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just jump in and largely agree with a lot of what Scott said. And first, Chris, thank you for having me, and thank you to all of the amazing partners at Housing California and the organizations and activists who are on this call for your work. And for those of us that want to build more housing in California and want to help move the needle on our housing crisis, we're just super grateful for your partnership and for all the work you do, often in challenging circumstances, to help us try to make some progress. And as a lot of folks have probably heard me say, I'm one of those people, the deeper into my legislative career that I get, the more I am convinced of the fact that many, if not all of the roads lead back to housing in the state. And so many of the challenges that we face, when you talk about environmental issues, when you talk about cost of living issues, when you talk about so many of the different challenges, homelessness that we face here in the state of California, so much of that is the result of our failures on housing and homelessness. And so just grateful for the folks on this call, and obviously would be remiss if I didn't thank Senator Wiener for his leadership. And he's obviously been a really important partner and outspoken advocate on all this. The things I will add to what Scott said, he did mention that there was some encouraging performance that we've seen in terms of general funds and tax receipts coming in. But there's an excellent piece that Jason Sisney put out today. For those of you that don't follow him on Substack, I would highly recommend it. Just talking about sort of the state's, where we sort of stand in terms of the fact that disbursements have come in ahead of projections, but really all of the challenges that we face, whether that be, those revenues being spoken for with the Prop 98 maintenance factor that was part of last year's budget, with new bonds new ballot measures approved by voters. So there's a lot of, as Scott mentioned, there's some good news, but there are also some real challenges there. And I would encourage everybody to subscribe to that, because I think it provides an interesting take on all that. The one thing I would layer on top of that, something that's been on my mind, is how is this new administration going to impact our budget? Obviously, we're thinking a lot about the policy challenges that we may face. And for many of us, understanding that California is going to have to step up and protect our communities and protect our planet and the progress that we've made on issues. But I think that there's the potential for there to be real budgetary challenges there as well. And we have to see if the president-elect is going to follow through on his threats to cut off disaster aid, or if they're going to try to pull out of agreements with California or withhold funding. That really could make a very significant difference for us. And I think folks are still starting to wrap their heads around the challenges we face there. So even above sort of the baseline uncertainty that we're facing and the baseline challenges, and Scott also mentioned, even though we did some really good work last year, we still have projected out year issues. I think everyone here should be aware of that. Even though we were able to make some progress last year, there are still some structural issues we have to get on. Even on top of that is this new layer of challenges with the new administration. All that having been said, let me say I am really proud of the work that the legislature did, and I think it's fair to say that the assembly was really activated around, even in a really complicated budget, even in really the largest shortfall in state history. We were able to protect some really important investments in housing and homelessness, and you saw that with LIHTC and MHP. It was really the assembly and the legislature that were fighting for those programs, and ultimately in partnership with Governor Newsom, able to preserve them. That having been said, we're going to have to fight for those again in this new challenging environment. And I want everybody to just be geared up for the fact that we are entering a very dynamic, very uncertain, very challenging budgetary moment for the state. And so to preserve those programs that we know are essential to addressing our housing crisis, folks are really going to need to lean in.
Yeah, I certainly can appreciate, I think there were a lot of decisions that were having to be made this year. And I think housing folks were excited to see that we were able to maintain some of those investments, and appreciate both of your work in leading all of that, because those investments are so critical, especially today when we don't have redevelopment, we don't have ongoing funding. We have to keep working every year to secure those investments. So appreciate everything that was done last year. I'm wondering how you all are approaching this year. I mean, I think as we head into another potential deficit year, how we should think about and be prepared for that as advocates, in terms of both the general fund and how we should approach that work, how maybe a housing bond could fit into those conversations. Just how should we be thinking about this, and how are you all thinking about heading into another deficit year where we need funding more than ever?
Um, I think ideally the sort of the houser world, in terms of folks who work in public investment and affordable housing, it would be ideal. It's always worth making a proposal, right? Even if you're not, even if it may end up not going anywhere, it is always worth, again, not going, not necessarily shooting for the stars, but making a reasonable proposal that everyone's behind, right? So you're
So,
not.
so says the guy who runs 16 hard bills a year. Why not just go for it?
Exactly. Um, but I think what would be not helpful is if you have like three different coalitions that are coming to us with like three different requests that may be partially overlapping. That gets confusing. If you can get everyone behind one proposal, and then the broad coalition comes forward with that, it may or may not succeed, but you never know. We don't know what the situation is going to look like in January, in March, in April, and if there could be a possibility for something to happen. And so having that there, with that broad support, would be. And this year, maybe it happens next year. On top of that, in terms of the bond, and I know there's been talk about trying to pursue a bond, I think that's always, it's been a few years now that that's been under discussion. And I think you should keep it under discussion because, for example, the climate bond that just passed, that our colleagues, particularly some of my colleagues, Senators Allen and Stern, and then Eddie Garcia in the Assembly, there was like they were reintroducing that bond proposed like every year for a number of years, and then finally the stars aligned and it made it to the ballot and it passed. So I think it is worth every year reintroducing that and having it pending, even if it takes some time to get it on the ballot.
I think that's all right. I will just repeat, Genevieve Morelos, our very talented staffer from the Assembly Budget Committee who works on a lot of these issues, is on this call. And I think the two things that she would want me to tell you, in fact, I know the two things she would want me to tell you are one, work in coalition, as Senator Wiener emphasized. You are much more powerful when you come to the legislature with a lot of folks rowing in the same direction and with a shared sense of priorities. So one is work in coalition, and the second is prioritize. Because if you come and you tell us everything is a priority, sometimes people interpret that as nothing is really a priority. And so again, to the senator's point, maybe we'll be in a position to do some big things. Maybe things will be more challenging than we anticipated with the new administration. You don't get what you don't ask for, but having a clear sense of prioritization is so, so, so important. And I know that that's challenging. And I know that in a coalition like yours, there can be differences of opinion about what priorities are. I know that folks in different parts of the state may have different things they priorities, but when you can come to the legislature and say, all of these organizations from up and down the state are working together, and we agree that these are the critical investments in this order for housing in the state of California. That is a very powerful thing. So work in coalition and prioritize.
Great advice. Hopefully, all of our colleagues that work in the housing and homelessness space are here and hear that, and we can all get our ducks in a row next year. I wanted to pivot and ask about legislation. You both are both champions in our budget committees, which where we were so excited to have you both because you are housing champions. And Senator Wiener being the former chair of the Senate Housing Committee, still on that committee, and Assemblymember Gabriel spending many years on the Assembly Housing Committee and authoring quite a few bills. And so wanted to offer up the opportunity for you both. I know you both had a couple housing bills last year and over the last few years. And just to highlight, one or two of the bills that you're most excited about from last year, or if you want to highlight something, maybe you're coming with something brand new for this next year that's going to overhaul everything. And maybe we'll have the silver bullet. So, wanted to see what you all have to share about legislative work.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I mean, certainly lots of conversations. I don't want to preempt any of my colleagues or any of the things that we're thinking about because I want to give people the opportunity to introduce their stuff in the right way and do the press and roll out in the way that they want to do it. But a lot of conversations. I think one of my takeaways from this very challenging election specific to California is there's a sense that we're just not getting the job done on some of these issues that really matter to working families and matter to communities up and down the state. And I have felt that way for a long time as it relates to housing and homelessness. And so certainly an area that will continue to be a priority for us. For me, as I think you all know, the investments in the low-income housing tax credit have been a priority. We had a bill that we were able to move all the way to the governor's desk last year to secure, ongoing funding for that program for 5 years for 500 million for the additional tax credits. I was, unfortunately, it got linked to another bill in a complicated way and ultimately didn't get the governor's signature. But I think for me to be able to move a bill of that magnitude, all the way through the process with strong support was for me a very positive indication. And so we're going to continue to try to do that work. I believe that the certainty of the state investment is something that's really important as organizations are out there trying to plan, understand what funding is in the pipeline, make decisions that having that certainty is really important. And so that's going to be an area that we continue to work in as we try to provide that stability. And then the way that I look at it, maybe taking a step back, is our job is to provide tools and resources, right? So that's the resource front. How do we provide the state investments in these programs that are important? And then on the tools front, I think a lot of what I'm interested in is how can we decomplicate this? How can we get out of the way? How can we make it easier for people to develop affordable housing more cheaply, more quickly, deliver it at a lower cost per door to help bring down rent? So I think a lot of the work that we need to do is on streamlining and helping to provide that reform that is actually going to expedite the process and make it easier and cheaper to build.
Senator Wiener, over to you. Have you worked on housing legislation ever, or?
Never. Um, yeah, I mean, we'll be doing some housing bills this year. We haven't fully decided, what they will be, but you can imagine always focused on trying to make it easier and faster to build new homes, period. So that'll continue to be a focus for me.
Is there anything you want to talk about? I know you had two bills at the end of last session, both 937 and 1037, or others that maybe you want to highlight from this year that were
Yeah.
the accomplishments.
So I was and SB 312 to make our student housing CEQA exemption usable. So that was great. So SB 1037 gives the Attorney General stronger tools to hold sort of bad faith cities who are really not just honest mistakes, but are intentionally violating state housing law, financial incentive not to do so. Because right now, if it gets to the extreme point that the Attorney General sues the city, like a Huntington Beach situation, and then wins, goes so all the way up until litigation, all the way through litigation to entry of judgment against the city still gets several months to correct its violation and have no consequences. We that is nonsensical. So now there will be financial consequences. Um, and then SB 937 defers not all, but a bunch of impact fees. Instead of paying them when you pull the permit, you pay them upon certificate of occupancy. And in terms of getting projects to pencil, it will make a big deal. And the Turner Center actually just put out an analysis saying that SB 937 will reduce the cost of the average project by 1%, which for folks, who understand housing financing, that's actually quite significant in terms of making a project pencil. So, we're impact fees are one of those areas where, and I say this as a former local elected official who authored California or San Francisco's transportation impact development fee and has been supportive of impact fees. Not all cities, but many cities have just gone too far. And I'm not criticizing cities. Cities have been put in a terrible position where we have made it so hard for them to raise revenue, and putting fees on development is like one of the easiest ways to raise quick cash. But it ends up getting to the point for some cities where it's just a big tax on new housing, and there's no rhyme or reason. This data is from a few years ago, but as of a few years ago, the cost per door in terms of exactions in San Francisco was almost 200,000 per housing unit. Oakland was like, I don't know, 60 or 80,000, and Sacramento was like 20,000. I'm sure I have those numbers a little off, but that you get the general gist. It's all over the map. And when we're talking about things like, paying for public transportation or road improvements, paying for schools, paying for parks, paying for affordable housing, I'm not opposed to impact fees, but it has to be within reason. And taxpayers need to step up and do more. And these things benefit everyone. And for impact fees, we just need to make sure it's not getting so far out of whack that it ends up making these projects non-viable. Or just the only thing that pencils is something very high end. And so that so this was a step saying let's pay it at the end, not the beginning, but that work around rationalizing impact fees needs to continue.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. I know our developers have been looking at that for quite a while, thinking about some reforms there, and so appreciate the work you did there. I'm wondering, this last year we had some key themes really come out of the legislature, right? There was a lot around efficiency, there was a lot around accountability, particularly around homelessness and the resources we're spending there. There was a lot of discussion around the Coastal Commission, and building affordable housing around the coast. I'm wondering, do you see those themes being similar for this coming year? Do you think there's going to be anything new that comes about that, whether it's in light of the federal landscape changing, or do you see these themes kind of holding true, or some new ones emerging?
I'll jump in here very quickly. Accountability and efficiency was a major priority for Assembly Democrats. I think you saw one of the first things that the speaker did when he restructured the committee was to create a new budget sub 7. And obviously Assemblymember Valencia there, played an important role and worked really closely with Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva, who I know you're going to have on here, and I want to give her a shout out because she's been an incredible champion on these issues. But really to try to make progress on this issue. And I think for those of you that were watching Sacramento and saw some of the hearings that we had and some of the tough questions that we asked of folks from different agencies and departments, we want to see progress. and we want to see progress quickly and rapidly. And we understand that that's what constituents are demanding at this point. And so I think this continued focus on where are we getting high ROI for state investment? Where do we feel like we can really move the needle on these issues? We're going to focus a lot at, I talked about prioritization. We're going to have to make some tough choices as we did last year, right? To tighten our belts the same way that families are doing and decide where we're going to invest scarce resources. And so we want to understand which programs are going to have the biggest impact and where we're going to get the most return and the most public good for our limited dollars. The other thing that I think you can expect to see is us continuing to have very frank and honest conversations.
Did we lose him for a moment?
More metrics, some more data, some more accountability from our partners in local government. And honestly, we had some very frank conversations with, my friend Daryl Steinberg and some of the other big city mayors about how we needed to have stronger accountability built in around all of that. So I think you will absolutely continue to see that. It was interesting for me that people across the ideological spectrum in the Assembly, and really across the ideological spectrum of the Assembly Democratic Caucus, were very, very supportive of the accountability and transparency provision. So expect to see more of that.
Any other themes you want to highlight, Senator?
No, I think with the Coastal Commission, I mean, I think it's an ongoing, conversation. Obviously, I've had my disputes with the commission around SB 423, where we removed the blanket exemption for the coastal zone for us for streamlining. And I think we actually came to a good resolution, and we worked very hard with then Chair Luz Rivas and with the commission, and came up with, I think, a resolution to make sure that we were protecting natural resources in the coastal zone, but also understanding we have plenty of urbanized areas in the coastal zone that shouldn't be exempt. And so that was tense, but I think it was actually a really good result. I hope it provides a template. And then this year we were able to, I did a small fix for San Francisco in this weird quirk in our portion of the coastal zone, and the commission, was okay with what we were doing. And then we also had another piece, which we actually, because of weird bill chaptering issues, we spun off and it went into a Chris Ward bill, and that's where it was signed, to make sure that the timelines for rezoning under a housing element aligned with the timeline for the Coastal Commission to approve a local coastal plan amendment, because cities have a certain a few years, usually a year or a few years, to rezone in conformity with their housing element. But if they also need to get the Coastal Commission to approve an amendment to their local coastal plan, and that takes longer, they're put between a rock and a hard place where they're missing their housing element rezoning deadline because the commission process is longer. And so we aligned those timelines, which I think is just really good government.
So looking at some of the questions real quick in the Q&A, I'm wondering, I see kind of two or so that might be really helpful to hit on. The first is whether there's going to be any housing discussed in the special session, or if you think that'll be focused elsewhere, and whether there's a housing tint to be had on that.
The focus of the special session is appropriating funds for the Attorney General to be able to defend California residents and values and policies from this, from the Trump, Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Gaetz administration, and to be able to file affirmative lawsuits. And so some of that could relate to housing, but it's too soon to say. We just want to make sure that we are fully prepared, that the Attorney General is fully prepared. And the special session will be, at the same time as our regular session. So whatever we need to do in the regular session, we'll do as well.
Looking at there's one attendee that noted that community outreach seems to be a way that jurisdictions are blocking projects that are considered by right, and wondering if you've heard about that and whether that's an area in which we should be looking at, considering as we think about streamlining affordable housing.
So I mean, I would be curious to know what exactly that person is referring to. And Ryan Motashemi in my office is on here. I think doesn't have good enough reception right now to be on, but perhaps Ryan could drop his email in the chat, or you can find him on our website. If there is ever a loophole on any of the housing streamlining laws, we want to know about it. Community outreach should not be a loophole, and I'm not sure what they're referring to, but we're always interested in knowing about loopholes that need to be closed.
Makes sense. Maybe I'll just, based on what we've got, I'll let you all kind of close out any final thoughts you have, things that people should consider and priorities as we move into next year. Maybe Assemblymember Gabriel, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, no, I think we've benefited collectively from a number of years of really strong budgets, and we've been able to make some really important investments. Notwithstanding that, we still have some tremendous challenges ahead of us, and we are in the lean years now. And even though there's some potential indications that there's some bright spots with revenue, I think for all of the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, and for all of the uncertainty that we face with the new administration, it may be another challenging year. There may be some turbulence ahead of us, not just this year, but for the next couple of years, and that may force some difficult choices. And so I think people should go into it with a realistic and sober assessment of the challenges ahead. We're also in the position where we don't have multi-year commitments for a lot of the things that all of us care about. So we're going to need to get in there. We're going to need to fight for the programs that we all believe in, the programs that we all prioritize together. And also, you're fortunate to have people like Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva who are leaders on this issue, and hi Sharon, and who have a track record, and you can count on to do the right thing. We also have a bunch of brand new colleagues, and we're all still figuring them out, and you're also going to need to spend time getting to know them, educating them, explaining all. Some of them are going to be familiar with some of these programs, and some are not. And some are going to understand that housing needs to be a top of the agenda and a top priority for all of us, and others may have other priorities that are important to them. So I just want to emphasize we have our work cut out for us collectively. But I think you can count on me. You can count on Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva. You can count on the Assembly to try to be really strong partners in this work because we understand how important it is. But I do want folks to go in with a very sober and realistic assessment of the challenges ahead. They are not small, and to make progress and frankly to maintain some of these investments that we've seen over the past couple of years is going to require a lot of hard work, a lot of strategy, and a lot of prioritization.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that it was uh, earlier at the beginning of this year when the pro tem Senator McGuire came to me and asked me to vacate the housing chair and to become budget chair. At first, I was like, "Oh boy!" Like right in time for this like massive mega budget deficit. Like what? Like, have I did I do something to anger you or? But then I very quickly understood that being budget chair in a terrible budget year is incredibly important because yes, you don't have the luxury of being able to do all this new stuff and which is always very exciting. But it's the difficult budget times are when we truly protect our values. And so we were able to do that last year in protecting funding for our public schools, protecting funding for public transportation, clawing back a bunch of the proposed cuts for housing around housing and homelessness, and so on and so forth. And that was incredibly important, incredibly meaningful, and a lot of people, their lives will be better because of the work that the legislature and the governor did during these bad years. And so we'll just keep doing the same and just pray that revenues keep coming in at a reasonable clip and hopefully it won't be as bad as last year.
And I know that Senator Wiener is drawing a lot of comfort in the fact that the Dodgers won the World Series. So we also have that to celebrate.
How did I know there was going to be a baseball reference? Well, appreciate you both for being with us. Obviously, we got our work cut out for us, but it's great to have two housing champions as the chairs of our budget committees, both to continue to prioritize housing in our budget. And appreciate you all, you both, for being with us today and all the work you do.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And with that, we will transition now to we have Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva representing Orange and Los Angeles counties from the city of Fullerton with us here today. I know you've got a tight window here, so we will be quick and I will stop rambling. But wanted to start by just asking you to share. We I know we're going to talk largely about legislation, but wanted to start with the budget because you are you lead the Assembly Subcommittee 5, formerly Sub 4, which handles housing and homelessness. So anything you want to share with us about your perspective on the budget from this last year and looking forward, and highlights that you feel like we had from this year?
Thanks, Chris, for having me, and to Housing California folks. I really appreciate being asked to share some thoughts with you today. And yes, being the chair of Budget Sub 5, I think was really an important role, particularly in a budget crisis, as was noted with Senator Scott Wiener, because it made us really look at what are we funding, how are these programs working, and what do we really want to fight for? And what are we being asked to fight for? Of course, there was some easier, if you want to say, focus of saving programs like the HAP dollars. We know that we heard from many advocates that these really do make a difference in our local communities, whether it's shelter funding, whether it's support services, and even looking at transitional housing, that these mean a lot in each jurisdiction. And so we're really proud of saving a good amount of that funding. We also questioned and really wanted to get information about existing programs that we weren't entirely sure that were making those differences. So one of the big asks from the governor's team was his encampment funding. And we pushed back on that quite a bit, wanting to make sure that we weren't just, quote, beautifying California and moving one encampment to 3 blocks further. And yet there was still dollars retained in there. I'll say more than I preferred. So we know that we have work to do in the future budget. As was noted, we need to be very tempered with what we're going to fight for. We certainly have already seen the governor come out with laying the groundwork for the film tax credit, which is, of course, not under housing, but could protect many jobs and bring back that industry that we want here. But the big but there is not at the cost of us divesting from housing. So, for example, the low-income housing tax credits. We know those are vital for these projects that many times get cobbled together with multiple funding sources. And certainly we don't want to see the state back away from that type of investment. So there's programs we're going to continue to stand up for, fight for, educate our new incoming members about the why these are vital in our communities, what it means in their communities, which I'd ask those of you who are on the call to really make sure you talk to your advocates and let them know that that's an important part of what they should do. I'll just end with this on the budget, is we found that sometimes people came in early to talk to us about certain budget efforts that they were advocating, and some were very quiet. And I certainly, we want to hear from individuals, but like the budget chair, Jesse Gabriel, just said, they need to be tempered. They need to be looked at as not like we're hearing things are better, so let's ask for $250 million in a budget ask. Those are probably not going to be moved forward in that capacity.
Makes a ton of sense, considering the circumstances we're facing. I wonder if you could highlight. I know we've got just a few more minutes before you have to run, so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about bills. I know you're very active in legislation and on the, as part of the housing committee and your work there, and so wanted to see if you want to highlight any bills you were working on, anything, any themes or ideas that have been coming out from last year, and kind of open it up to you to if there's things that like priorities that you feel like are going to be coming out this coming year for us to be looking out for.
Thank you. This is now going to be heading into my last term of state assembly. So we have authored and had success with quite a bit of housing and homelessness and mental health bills. Really proud of our bill last year, AB 2137, which focuses on foster youth and homelessness. We really worked very carefully within the budget to assure that we weren't going to make decisions that looked like they helped in the budget short term, but long term, we're going to push foster youth directly into homelessness. So that bill was signed. Happy about that. But we're going to continue to work in the area that I firmly believe we have not paid enough attention to that, and that's on homelessness prevention. Many of us have brought in and focused on bringing in dollars to shelters once people are homeless. But as we know, once somebody becomes homeless and they are evicted, it's extremely difficult to get them into their next step housing, whether it's an apartment because they have that eviction on their record. So looking at ways to possibly offset rents, subsidize. We did, myself and Assemblymember Rick Zabur worked on that last year. We weren't able to get it across the finish line. We know there's a lot of competing uses for state dollars, but we're going to still continue to work in that area because we know all too well it may be a 6-month subsidy that could keep somebody from falling into homelessness and then get them on their way. So that is one area that I'm very committed to. The second area is permitting. Assemblymember Buffy Wicks has a select committee on permitting, and we were up in San Francisco on the coast looking at why, in fact, is it taking sometimes years to get projects off the ground? We all know that the regulations and the hurdles that developers, nonprofits have to go through to get a project can sometimes take 5-6 years for a project to actually be built from the time of conception to it, people actually living there. We have to shorten that timeline and we have to get people housed. So those are two areas that we definitely are going to be looking at is permitting and prevention in housing. And you can look forward to us possibly doing a informational hearing on prevention. I think we'll be focusing just on that. But again, safeguarding some of the investments that we have and like the HAP dollars.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can ask one more question real quick.
Of course.
I was curious, as you mentioned, you've been in the legislature for a little bit, and a lot has changed, and a lot of circumstances have changed. The focus has shifted quite a bit over the last few years. So I'm just curious, kind of how you feel like your perspective has changed or not changed, since you've been in the legislature, and like anything you've learned over your time, as an assembly member.
Thank you. I'm now what you would call a decade in, and a fun fact for those of you out there that don't know too much about me, myself and Elmer Astucci, Assembly member, we are the only two members that will be returning from the 2012 class, which means that we lost in 2014 and came back, and now we'll be returning. So we are the only two members that will have served under two governors, four speakers, and so, yes, you gain a lot of knowledge during this time. I've had several chairmanships from community communications and conveyance, arts and entertainment, veterans, but especially in housing. I really wanted to work through the budget because over these years, I definitely saw that that is certainly area of expertise that I wanted to gain. But the lessons are that for legislators and myself being in a swingy district, meaning that it's a difficult district to be elected to and stay in, you have to listen. And I think nationally, we have seen that. We have to listen to not what we believe, but what people are telling us. I come from a large Latino family where I have nephews and sisters and brothers. When I say large, I'm talking 10 siblings up and down the California. And it was not a surprise to me that some of the elections that we saw nationally and even locally, people were talking about affordability issues, rents. We know that in housing. The affordability in Orange County is $2,500 uh, or closer to 3,000 for a two-bedroom. How are people affording this? We can say eggs all day or milk, but it's true. When you combine that with utility costs, when you combine that with gas prices, people are struggling. So even though the numbers, we could say, well, inflation's down, people didn't feel that, and they certainly didn't feel that they were being listened to. And issues, things like our encampments make people very nervous. Are they safe in their neighborhoods? Are we really making progress? So I would tell new legislators, I would tell advocates, it's really important to listen, to try to engage and stay on top of what regular working class folks are saying. Electric vehicles, it sounds great, but how many people working in hospitality are going to have a place to even charge or to buy a used electric vehicle? These are real issues for folks.
Yeah, that's some really great insight into kind of how things, I mean, it's wild to just think about. I remember working on a bill with you many years ago around rent subsidies and all the work we did then and how much has changed between then and now. And it's both in some ways good, in some ways still a lot of challenges and a lot of struggle. Um, I'm wondering if just real quick for the last question, just kind of anything you want to share about your outlook for next year and how you feel like, you got 2 more years. There's still 2 more years. We got to continue that work and what you feel like is going to be a priority for you.
Well, I really love this question to end with because after a decade, sometimes people think, well, you've already done quite a few. We have over 50 bills signed in our name. We've done things in content area like housing, homeless, mental health that will still be my core values. But I really wanted to relook at how we were doing legislation. And so we've already reached out to advocates, to lobbyists to say, these are the areas that we want to work in versus waiting till January and kind of saying, okay, here's a stack of bills. Which do you want to do? Because I feel that it really is a learning process, whether you're a first year legislator or in my case, going into my 11th, you have to be fresh. You have to seek out good bills. I really, have certain areas that I want to work in. And when I reflect, it's easy to get in a kind of a little slump, I guess, if you would say it that way. So we are excited. But the biggest thing I think I would say is taking slivers of pieces of legislation that you're really excited about, because those small things mean as big as the big things. So, for example, we're not doing an AB 2011 like Buffy Wicks has carried, but we're taking little pieces to add to that support for that type of legislation. So we'll continue working in those areas. I'll just end an area that's somewhat related to housing, but not necessarily, that I'm very invested in spending time in my last 2 years is on formerly incarcerated. With everything we saw statewide, now we may be going backwards to many more individuals being incarcerated. It's, to me, the question is what happens when they get out? And we know housing for formerly incarcerated is very difficult. Jobs. So really looking in that space. And I've had the opportunity to travel to Oslo, to Ireland and Scotland, visiting prisons. And again, it's that idea of getting really educated. And there's no stamp on a timeline as a legislator. You can do that all the way up to your last day. And that's what I intend to do.
Well, it's great to hear that focus going into next year. I know that's an area that Housing California and our partners have been very interested in doing some work on. So you might get a call from me soon on that one. But appreciate that. Appreciate you joining us and being with us today. I know you've got quite a busy schedule, and really looking forward to continuing to work with you in this coming session. And appreciate all the work you've done as the chair of Sub 5 and all of your previous work. And looking forward to continuing that. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you so much. And to all you housing folks out there, I was a former classroom teacher, elementary school. So I like to say slow and steady get you where you need to go. And it's just those steps that keeps moving us forward. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks, Assemblymember. Well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up here. So unfortunately, the newly elected Senator Reyes is not able to join us. So I'm gonna wrap us up. But before we wrap, I wanted to just quickly mention that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our conference opened up registration today. So for those of you that have been to the best housing conference in the country, it is coming up this coming March in Sacramento. And hopefully you saw that link and can get registered to hang with us in March. But with that, appreciate you all joining us for this quarterly town hall. Our next town hall will be in 2025 to start us off sometime early next year. And look forward to talking to you all then. And thank you for joining us here today. Thanks. See you all in the next year.